My name is Ruby, 67 years old and a retired elementary school teacher. The home where my son kicked me out was the same one I shared with my late husband Frank for 30 years. We built our lives within those walls, planning to age peacefully there. Thomas was our only child, the one I sacrificed everything for. I never imagined that one day he would tell me, "My wife's family will live here now, leaving me homeless overnight." Before I tell you how my own son kicked me out of my home, let me know where you're watching from, and subscribe if you want more real-life stories that will break and mend your heart. I spent 40 wonderful years teaching third graders before retiring 5 years ago. The children brought so much joy to my life, their innocent laughter and curious questions filling my days with purpose. When I finally hung up my teaching badge, I looked forward to peaceful golden years in the home Frank and I had worked so hard for. Frank and I purchased our 4-bedroom house in Portland when Thomas was just a baby. It was more than we could afford at the time, but Frank believed in investing in our future. "This will be our forever home, Ruby," he would say with that confident smile I fell in love with. For 30 years we made payments, slowly turning that house into a home filled with memories. The backyard maple tree we planted when Thomas took his first steps now towers over the property, its branches stretching toward the sky like protective arms. Frank passed away 7 years ago from heart failure. It happened so suddenly one autumn morning. We had just finished breakfast when he clutched his chest and collapsed. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was gone. The doctor said it was quick, that he didn't suffer, but that knowledge provided little comfort during those first months alone. After losing Frank, maintaining our home became my way of keeping his memory alive. I tended the garden he loved, fixed the squeaky steps he never got around to repairing, and kept his favorite armchair in the living room, even though I never sat in it. That house contained 30 years of our marriage, every corner holding whispers of our shared life. Thomas was our only child, born after years of trying. We poured everything into raising him, making sacrifices to ensure he had opportunities we never had. Frank worked double shifts at the factory while I taught during the day and tutored evenings. When Thomas showed academic promise, we started a college fund for going vacations and new cars to secure his future. I still remember the pride on Frank's face when Thomas graduated college. Neither of us had degrees, and watching our son receive his diploma felt like the culmination of all our sacrifices. "He will go further than we ever could," Frank whispered, as we watched Thomas accept his business degree. We believed every penny spent on his education was an investment in his character and future. Thomas met Meredith at a corporate retreat 5 years ago. She worked in marketing at a rival company, and according to Thomas, they connected instantly over their shared ambitions. When he first brought her home for dinner, I was impressed by her polished appearance and articulate conversation. She complimented my cooking and asked thoughtful questions about Frank's photographs on the mantel. I remember thinking she would make a wonderful daughter-in-law. "Mom, she's the one," Thomas told me that night after she left. He seemed truly smitten, and after losing Frank, seeing my son happy gave me tremendous joy. I supported their relationship wholeheartedly, even when I began noticing small red flags in Meredith's behavior. The wedding 3 years ago was lavish, far beyond what Thomas could afford on his mid-level management salary. When I gently suggested scaling back, Meredith dismissed my concerns. "We deserve our special day exactly how we want it," she insisted, adding that perhaps I was too frugal to understand modern weddings. Thomas sided with her, and I backed away, not wanting to cause tension. I later learned they financed most of the celebration with credit cards, beginning their marriage under a mountain of debt. After the honeymoon, Meredith's attitude toward me subtly shifted. The woman who had once asked about my teaching stories now seemed bored by my presence. During family dinners, she would check her phone or steer conversations toward her career achievements. Thomas appeared not to notice, or perhaps chose not to. When I mentioned these changes to my best friend Joanne, she suggested I might be overly sensitive due to losing my husband. I wanted to believe that was true. Despite the growing distance, I continued making efforts to maintain a good relationship with them. I remembered my own mother-in-law and how her criticism had created tension in my early marriage. I was determined not to repeat that pattern with Meredith. I sent thoughtful gifts, offered help without being intrusive, and always made myself available when they needed me while respecting their privacy as a couple. Thomas had been working for the same marketing firm for 8 years when the company underwent restructuring. His department was downsized, and despite his experience, he found himself unemployed last spring. The timing couldn't have been worse. They had just purchased a new luxury car and were planning an expensive vacation to celebrate their 3rd anniversary. I later discovered they had almost no savings, having spent well beyond their means throughout their marriage. When Thomas called me, his voice tight with worry, I didn't hesitate. "You can stay with me until you get back on your feet," I offered. "The house has plenty of room." I genuinely thought it would be a blessing in disguise, a chance to reconnect with my son and hopefully improve my relationship with Meredith. We agreed they would stay for 3 months, giving Thomas time to find new employment while they saved money on rent. The day they moved in, Thomas hugged me tightly. "Thanks, Mom. I don't know what we'd do without you," he said, and for a moment I glimpsed the sweet boy I raised. Meredith thanked me as well, though her smile didn't quite reach her eyes as she surveyed the living room. "We won't be a burden," she promised. "This is just temporary." I believed her. I truly did. The first week of Thomas and Meredith's stay went remarkably well. We shared meals together, catching up on each other's lives. Thomas spent his days applying for jobs, while Meredith continued working remotely from my dining room. In the evenings, we watched movies together, almost like the family gatherings I had missed since Frank passed away. Those initial days gave me hope that not only would I be helping my son through a difficult time, but also rebuilding our relationship in the process. "Your mom is actually a pretty good cook," I overheard Meredith telling Thomas one night. That simple comment warmed my heart. I had prepared all of Thomas's favorite childhood meals that week, hoping to provide comfort during his stressful job search. Hearing Meredith appreciate my efforts felt like progress in our relationship. By the second week, subtle shifts began occurring in the household dynamics. One morning I came downstairs to find the living room furniture rearranged. The sofa that had faced the fireplace for 20 years, now backed against the window, and Frank's reading lamp had been moved to the attic. "We needed space for my yoga practice," Meredith explained when I asked about the changes. "I hope you don't mind. This arrangement makes much better use of the space." While I was surprised they hadn't consulted me first, I reminded myself that sharing a home required flexibility. "It looks nice," I said, swallowing my discomfort. Thomas watched this exchange silently, his eyes darting between us before returning to his laptop screen. I noticed he didn't offer any opinion on the changes to the home he grew up in. Small criticisms began emerging during the 3rd week. "The kitchen counters are so cluttered," Meredith remarked one morning as I prepared breakfast. "And have you considered updating these cabinets? Cherry wood is so outdated." Later that same day, she commented on my laundry routine. "You really should separate your clothes better, Ruby. No wonder your whites look dingy." Each criticism felt like a small paper cut, insignificant on its own, but painful when accumulated. Thomas, who once would have defended me, remained conspicuously silent during these exchanges. Occasionally, he would even echo Meredith's sentiments. "Mom, she has a point about the clutter. This place could use some updating." By the 4th week, I found myself retreating to my bedroom earlier each evening. The living room I had enjoyed for decades no longer felt welcoming, with Meredith constantly rearranging decorations, or Thomas sighing when I turned on my favorite evening news program. "Do we really have to watch this again?" he would ask, though he had grown up with this same routine. My daily rituals slowly eroded under their scrutiny. My morning coffee on the porch was interrupted by Meredith's complaints about the birds being too loud. My afternoon gardening sessions were criticized for wasting water on plants nobody cares about. Even my weekly phone calls with retired teaching colleagues drew comments about gossiping too loudly. I began adjusting my schedule to avoid conflicts. I woke earlier to enjoy my coffee before they rose. I gardened while they were busy with work calls. I took my evening bath earlier so as not to disturb them with running water when they watched TV. Each adjustment felt like conceding another small piece of territory in my own home. When my friend Joanne invited me to lunch and asked how the living arrangement was going, I found myself making excuses for Thomas and Meredith. They're just stressed about money and the job situation, I explained. And it's an adjustment for everyone to share space. Even as I spoke, I recognized I was minimizing my discomfort, something Frank always said I did too often. Ruby, Joanne said, reaching for my hand across the table. It's your house. You don't need to tiptoe around in your own home. Her words resonated with me, but I pushed them aside. Family helps family through difficult times, I told myself. This was temporary. The first major incident occurred exactly 1 month after they moved in. I had spent the day visiting a former student who had become a teacher herself, eager to hear about her first year in the classroom. When I returned home around dinner time, something felt immediately different. The house was unusually quiet, and Thomas and Meredith were nowhere to be found. I walked upstairs to change clothes and turned toward my craft room, the small bedroom where I kept my knitting supplies, scrapbooking materials, and the quilt I had been working on for months. The door stood open, but the room I entered was unrecognizable. My crafting table was gone, replaced by a sleek desk with Meredith's laptop. My shelves of supplies had vanished, and the walls now held her professional certificates and motivational posters. Even the quilt frame had disappeared. Shock rendered me momentarily speechless. This room had been my sanctuary since retirement, the place where I created gifts for former students and worked on preserving family photos for Thomas. Now every trace of my hobbies had been erased. I found Thomas and Meredith in the kitchen preparing dinner without me. "What happened to my craft room?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady, despite my racing heart. Meredith smiled as though I had asked about the weather. "We repurposed it into a proper home office. I can't keep working from the dining room table. It's not ergonomic." "But my supplies, my projects—" "We boxed everything up in the garage," Thomas interjected. "You hardly use that room anyway, Mom." "I was in there yesterday working on a quilt," I said. "Well, Meredith needs a professional workspace," Thomas replied, his tone suggesting the matter was closed for discussion. "Her job actually pays our bills right now." The implication stung worse than the act itself. I had opened my home without hesitation, expecting nothing in return, yet somehow I was being made to feel selfish for wanting to maintain one small room for my own interests. "You could have asked me first," I said quietly. "We didn't want to bother you with small decisions," Meredith replied, turning back to the stove. "Besides, the change is better for everyone. That room gets the best light for working." Later that night, I sat in my bedroom examining the boxes they had carelessly filled with my crafting supplies. Several delicate picture frames were cracked, and the nearly completed quilt had been folded, roughly creasing the careful stitching. As I tried to reorganize the chaos, tears filled my eyes for the first time since they had moved in. Not just for my disrupted projects, but for what the incident represented: a complete disregard for my space and feelings. When I called Joanne the next day to tell her what happened, her advice was direct. "Ruby, you need to establish boundaries now, or this will only get worse." "They're family," I said weakly, "and they're going through a hard time." "Family respects each other," she countered. What they did wasn't respectful. I knew she was right, but couldn't bring myself to create conflict when Thomas was already stressed about finding employment. Instead, I continued making accommodations, telling myself it was just for 2 more months. Thomas would find a job, they would move out, and our relationship would recover. I had no idea then how naive that hope was, or how much worse things would become. April blossomed into May, then melted into June, with no signs of Thomas and Meredith making plans to move out. The 3-month timeline we had agreed upon came and went without any acknowledgement from them. Thomas had secured several job interviews, but rejected the offers, claiming they were beneath his experience level or didn't offer appropriate compensation. Meanwhile, Meredith continued working remotely, spreading her materials throughout more areas of the house each week. One evening over dinner, I gently broached the subject. "Have you two thought about when you might be looking for your own place again?" I kept my tone casual, careful not to sound like I was pushing them out. The silence that followed my question stretched uncomfortably. Thomas and Meredith exchanged a look I couldn't interpret before Thomas cleared his throat. Actually, Mom, we've been thinking it makes more sense to stay here longer term, he said. Rent prices are insane right now, and I'm still waiting for the right opportunity to come along. This situation works well for everyone, Meredith added, not meeting my eyes. This house is too big for just one person anyway. You must get lonely rattling around in here all by yourself. Their assumption that they could unilaterally extend our agreement caught me off guard. More troubling was Meredith's comment about the house being too big for me, the implication being that I had less right to the space than they did. The home Frank and I had sacrificed for decades to pay off was suddenly being framed as an excessive indulgence for a widow. I understand the rental market is difficult, I said carefully, but we did agree on 3 months. I'm happy to help you look for affordable options. We don't need help looking, Thomas replied, his voice taking on an edge I rarely heard directed at me. We need time to save money without throwing it away on rent, unless you're suddenly hurting for cash, Mom. The question felt like a trap. If I said yes, I would be lying. If I said no, I was admitting I had no financial reason to want my home back to myself. It's not about money, I began. Then what's the problem? Meredith interrupted. We keep to ourselves, we help with utilities. Most parents would be happy to have their children close. I didn't pursue the conversation further that night, but a growing uneasiness settled in my stomach. Something had shifted in our dynamic and not in my favor. As June progressed, my freedom within my own home became increasingly restricted. Meredith established an unspoken schedule for kitchen use, making disapproving comments whenever I cooked during her preferred lunch preparation time. We're both trying to work here, Ruby, she would say when I used the blender or ran water too loudly. Some of us have important calls to make. The living room, once my evening retreat, became their domain after dinner. If I sat down to watch my favorite gardening show, Thomas would ask, "Do you mind if we watch something else? Meredith and I rarely get to relax together." What could I say to that without seeming selfish? Night after night, I surrendered the remote and eventually stopped coming downstairs in the evenings altogether. Even my morning routine came under scrutiny. Your shower woke us up at 7, Thomas complained one Saturday. Weekends are our only chance to sleep in. I've taken showers at 7 for 40 years, I reminded him, confused by this new grievance. Well, we need our privacy and rest, Meredith chimed in. You're retired. You can shower anytime. These comments accumulated daily, chipping away at my sense of ownership and belonging in my own home. It was as though they were systematically pushing me into smaller and smaller corners of my life, testing how much I would concede before pushing back. In early July, Meredith's parents came to visit for a weekend. I made a special effort to be welcoming, preparing a nice dinner and buying flowers for the guest room. I expected they would stay at a hotel, but Thomas announced they would be using my bedroom since it had a private bathroom. You can use the small guest room for a couple of nights, he informed me, not asked. It makes more sense for 4 people to have the 3 larger bedrooms. During their stay, Meredith's parents made little effort to interact with me beyond perfunctory greetings. At dinner, they criticized various aspects of my home within earshot. The outdated kitchen, the impractical garden layout, the old-fashioned decor. You really should consider selling, her father remarked directly to me over dessert. A place this size is a lot of maintenance for someone your age. Thomas and Meredith could use the space more effectively. I nearly choked on my pie. Sell my home, I have no intention of moving. Just something to consider, he replied with a dismissive wave. Real estate in this neighborhood is valuable. You could get a nice little condo and have money left over. The conversation confirmed my growing suspicion that these temporary arrangements were evolving into something more permanent in everyone's mind except mine. That night, squeezed into the twin bed in the small guest room, while strangers occupied my bedroom, I called Joanne in tears. Ruby, this has gone too far, she said firmly. You need to set boundaries now. This is your house, not theirs. I know, I whispered, afraid of being overheard. But I don't want to lose my relationship with Thomas. He's all I have left. Honey, what kind of relationship is this? Joanne asked gently. A good relationship goes both ways. This feels very one-sided. She was right, of course, but confronting Thomas still felt impossible. What if he became angry and cut me off completely? The thought of losing my only child terrified me more than the steady erosion of my autonomy. By August, I was experiencing physical symptoms from the stress: insomnia that left dark circles under my eyes, frequent headaches, a constant knot of anxiety in my stomach. My doctor noted my elevated blood pressure at my annual checkup and asked if anything was causing unusual stress in my life. I minimized the situation, unwilling to admit, even to a medical professional, how my own son was treating me. The breaking point came in late August, nearly 6 months after Thomas and Meredith had moved in. I returned from grocery shopping to find unfamiliar luggage in the hallway and voices coming from upstairs. Following the sound, I discovered a young woman unpacking clothes in my sewing room, the only remaining space that had been exclusively mine. "Hello?" I said, startling her. The woman looked up, surprised. "Oh, you must be Thomas's mom. I'm Allison Meredith's sister." My confusion must have shown on my face because she quickly added, "They didn't tell you I was coming. I'm staying for a few weeks while I look for jobs in the area." I stood frozen in the doorway watching this stranger arrange her belongings in what had been my last private retreat. "No," I finally managed. "They didn't mention it." Downstairs, I found Thomas in the kitchen and asked to speak with him privately. When Meredith insisted on joining us, I felt something hardening inside me, a resolve that had been forming slowly over months of disrespect. "Why is Meredith's sister moving into my sewing room?" I asked directly. "She needed a place to stay," Thomas replied casually. "It's just for a little while." "You didn't ask me," I said. "This is my home, Thomas." His expression darkened. "Mom, you're being selfish. Allison just broke up with her boyfriend and needed to get away. The room was sitting empty most of the time anyway." "It wasn't empty." I countered, my voice stronger than it had been in months. "I use that room every day. And regardless, this is my house. You can't just invite people to live here without consulting me." Thomas and Meredith exchanged a look I had seen too many times before, the look that said I was being difficult, unreasonable, an obstacle to their plans. "Maybe," Thomas said slowly. "It's time we discussed more permanent arrangements. This house is too big for you alone, and frankly, you could use the help. Maybe you should consider other living arrangements that better suit your needs." The words hit me like a physical blow. My son, the child I had sacrificed everything for, was suggesting I should leave my own home to accommodate him and his wife's family. In that moment, something fundamental changed in how I saw Thomas, and perhaps in how I saw myself as well. That night, lying awake in what used to be my bedroom before becoming the guest room, I realized Joanne had been right all along. This wasn't love or respect or even normal family support. This was exploitation, and it had gone on far too long. September brought a chill to the Portland mornings and a sickening revelation that shattered any remaining illusions I had about my son's intentions. I had been gardening early one Sunday, enjoying a rare moment of peace, before the house stirred to life, when voices drifted through the open kitchen window above me. "Your mother is becoming a problem." Meredith's voice carried clearly in the still morning air. "She's constantly hovering, making you feel guilty about stupid things like her sewing machine." "What am I supposed to do?" Thomas responded, sounding irritated. "We can't afford our own place right now, not with your sister also needing support." "We don't need our own place," Meredith said, her tone shifting to something calculating that made my hands freeze around my gardening shears. "This house is perfect. It's paid off in a great neighborhood and has enough room for everyone." "Mom's not going to move out," Thomas said, though his voice lacked conviction. "She doesn't have to move out right away," Meredith replied. "But I was looking into that senior living complex near my office. They have openings, and it would be perfect for her. Small, manageable people her own age." "Those places are expensive," Thomas objected. "Not if she sells this house to us," Meredith countered. "She could use the money to pay for a nice apartment there. We'd be doing her a favor, really. She can't manage this place much longer on her own." The blood drained from my face as I realized they were actively plotting to take my home. not temporarily sharing space during a difficult time, but orchestrating my permanent removal from the house I had owned for 30 years. The home where I had raised Thomas, where Frank and I had built our life together, where I had planned to live out my remaining years, surrounded by memories and independence. I don't know. Thomas sounded hesitant. She's really attached to this place. She's attached to the memories, not the house itself, Meredith dismissed. Besides, she's just one person. There are 5 of us if we count my parents visiting and Allison. It makes more sense for us to have the house. When should we bring it up? Thomas asked, and my heart shattered at how quickly he had moved from doubt to acceptance of this plan. Give it another week or 2, Meredith advised. I want to get my parents' input on renovations first. They're thinking of contributing to buying her out if they can stay here when they visit. I sank to the ground beside my flower bed, dirt staining my knees as the full weight of their betrayal pressed down on me. My own son was conspiring to push me out of my home, treating me like an inconvenient obstacle rather than his mother who had sacrificed everything for him. The garden blurred through my tears, but I made no sound, fearful they would hear me and realize I had overheard their scheme. That evening I retreated to my bedroom early, claiming a headache. In reality, I needed space to think, to process the devastating conversation I had overheard. I pulled out old photo albums tracing Thomas's growth from a smiling toddler to a confident teenager. Where had that sweet boy gone? The child who made me Mother's Day cards and promised to take care of me when I got old. The photographs blurred as tears fell freely now that I was alone. I remembered how Frank and I had scrimped and saved to afford Thomas's braces, his school trips, his college education. How we'd gone without new clothes and vacations so he could have every opportunity. I thought of Frank and wondered what he would say if he could see how our son was treating me now. Sleep eluded me that night as I contemplated my options. I could confront Thomas with what I had overheard, but given his recent behavior, I doubted it would change anything. I could continue accommodating their increasingly unreasonable demands, slowly giving up more of myself and my home until nothing remained. Or I could take action to protect myself and the home Frank and I had worked so hard to secure. By morning, I had made my decision. I would not go quietly. I would not surrender my home, my independence, or my dignity without a fight. But I needed to be strategic to plan my response carefully, rather than reacting emotionally. The next day, I approached Thomas while Meredith was on a work call. I'd like to talk about your long-term plans, I said calmly. It's been 6 months since you moved in, and I think we need clarity about the future. Thomas shifted uncomfortably. What's there to discuss? Things are working fine as they are. No, they're not, I replied firmly. This was meant to be temporary, and now Meredith's sister has moved in without my permission. I need to know when you're planning to find your own place. His expression hardened, reminding me painfully of the conversation I had overheard. Actually, Mom, we've been thinking that this arrangement makes sense long-term. He didn't even try to sound apologetic as he continued. My wife's family will live here now. The house is too big for just you, and we can help with maintenance. The brazenness of his statement, not asking but telling me about my own home, ignited something fierce within me. And where exactly do I fit into these plans? I asked, my voice steady, despite my racing heart. Thomas shrugged, avoiding my eyes. You could get a smaller place, something more manageable for someone your age. Where? I pressed, wanting to hear him say the words I knew were coming. His face flushed with either shame or anger, I couldn't tell which. Go to hell for all I care. He snapped, the veneer of reasonableness cracking to reveal the entitled stranger my son had become. You've had this house to yourself for years. It's our turn now. In the periphery of my vision, I noticed Meredith standing in the doorway, a smug smile playing at her lips. She had clearly been listening, perhaps hoping for exactly this confrontation. What happened next surprised all of us, perhaps me most of all. Instead of crying or yelling or begging, all reactions they might have expected, I smiled. A genuine, liberating smile that seemed to confuse them completely. I understand, I said quietly. Thank you for being honest about your intentions. Without another word, I went upstairs to my bedroom and began packing a small suitcase with essential clothing, toiletries, and medications. I added my jewelry box, containing the few valuable pieces Frank had given me over the years, several important documents from my filing cabinet, and the small photo album of Frank and me that I couldn't bear to leave behind. When I came downstairs with my suitcase, Thomas and Meredith were in the living room whispering intently. They fell silent when they saw me, expressions caught between surprise and triumph. "You're leaving?" Thomas asked, sounding uncertain for the first time. "Yes," I replied simply. "You've made it clear this is no longer my home." "Mom, don't be dramatic." He backpedaled slightly. "We just think it would be better for everyone if—" I held up my hand, stopping him mid-sentence. "I heard you, Thomas. My wife's family will live here now. Go to hell. Those were your words, not mine." His face reddened, but he didn't deny saying it. I took one last look around the living room where I had rocked Thomas as a colicky baby, where Frank and I had spent countless evenings discussing our dreams, where I had built a life filled with love and sacrifice. Then I walked to the door, pulled it open, and stepped outside without looking back. As I placed my suitcase in the trunk of my car, I caught a glimpse of their faces watching from the window. Thomas looking uncomfortable, Meredith triumphant. Neither came out to stop me. Neither asked where I would go. They had no idea what was coming next. The Hampton Inn 5 miles from my house welcomed me with impersonal efficiency. The room was clean and comfortable, if lacking the warmth and character of my home. But it offered something I hadn't experienced in months: peace. No criticisms, no intrusions, no feeling of walking on eggshells in spaces that should have been mine to enjoy freely. After settling in, I called Joanne. Her immediate reaction was exactly what I needed: outrage on my behalf, without judgment of my decisions. "Ruby, you can stay with me," she insisted. "I have plenty of room, and you shouldn't be alone right now." "Thank you, but I need to handle this my way," I replied, surprising myself with the calm determination in my voice. "I have a plan." "A plan?" Joanne sounded both curious and concerned. "What kind of plan?" "Justice," I said simply. "But I need to speak with some people first. Can we have dinner tomorrow night? I could use your support, just not in the way you're offering right now." Joanne agreed, and after ending our call, I made another to Mr. Baldwin, Frank's attorney, who had handled our will and house title years ago. His secretary initially said he was booked solid, but when I explained the urgency of my situation, she managed to fit me in the following morning. That night in the hotel room, I slept better than I had in months, free from the constant tension of navigating my own home under hostile occupation. The following morning, I dressed carefully in one of my nicest outfits, applied light makeup, and styled my hair. I wanted to look composed and dignified for the meetings ahead, not like a victim or a displaced elderly woman. Mr. Baldwin's office hadn't changed much since Frank and I had visited together to update our will after Thomas graduated college. The familiar wood paneling and leather chairs offered a comforting continuity with the past. The attorney himself had aged well, his hair now completely silver, but his handshake still firm and confident. "Mrs. Marshall," he greeted me warmly. "It's been several years. I was sorry to hear about your situation when you called." I explained everything that had transpired over the past 6 months, from the initially temporary arrangement to the gradual takeover of my home, culminating in Thomas's cruel dismissal. Mr. Baldwin listened attentively, occasionally making notes, but never interrupting. "Mr. Baldwin," I concluded, "what I need to know is whether I have any legal recourse. The house is still in my name, isn't it?" He nodded, pulling out a file from his cabinet. "Yes, the house is solely in your name, Ruby. Frank was insistent about that when we drafted your estate plans. He wanted to ensure you would always have security." Relief washed over me. "So legally they have no claim to it?" "None whatsoever," he confirmed. "You've allowed them to live there as guests, but you haven't signed any agreements transferring ownership or establishing tenancy. Legally speaking, you can reclaim your property at any time. Even though Thomas is my son, he seems to think he has some claim, because he'll inherit eventually." Mr. Baldwin's expression tightened slightly. "That's a common misconception. Potential future inheritance creates no current legal rights. The house is yours to do with as you please during your lifetime. You could sell it tomorrow and buy a yacht if you wanted to. For the first time in months, I laughed genuinely. No yachts for me, Mr. Baldwin. I just want my home back. We discussed the practical steps for reclaiming my house. Mr. Baldwin advised that while I could simply return with police assistance to remove unwanted guests, a more strategic approach might prevent further conflict. Given what you've told me, I'm concerned about potential damage to your property or personal belongings if they're angry about being removed, he explained. I suggest we document everything first and take measured steps. By the end of our meeting, we had formulated a plan. Mr. Baldwin would prepare legal notices and documentation while I gathered evidence of my ownership and made arrangements for securing the property. He recommended changing the locks once they were removed and installing a security system to prevent unauthorized re-entry. One more thing, I asked before leaving. Thomas mentioned that I'm getting older and can't manage the house. Could he use that argument to claim I'm incompetent somehow? Mr. Baldwin shook his head firmly. Based on our conversation today, I would testify to your complete competence if ever necessary. You're articulate, rational, and clearly capable of managing your affairs. Age alone is never grounds for declaring someone incompetent. With renewed confidence, I left his office and headed to my bank. The manager recognized me immediately, benefits of banking at the same local branch for decades, and escorted me to a private office when I explained I needed to discuss security concerns. "Mrs. Marshall, what can we help you with today?" she asked. "I need to verify that my accounts are secure," I explained. "My son and his wife have been staying in my home, and I'm concerned they may attempt to access my finances." The manager's expression grew serious as I shared the basic outlines of my situation. She immediately checked my accounts, revealing something disturbing. There had been 3 failed attempts to access my savings account online in the past month, all using incorrect passwords. "Would your son know your security questions or other personal details?" she asked. "Possibly." I admitted, feeling sick at the realization that Thomas might have been trying to access my money as well as take my home. "He knows my birthday, maiden name, things like that." Within an hour, we had changed all my passwords, updated security questions to information Thomas wouldn't know, and placed additional verification requirements on any significant withdrawals or transfers. The manager also helped me check my credit report to ensure no unauthorized accounts had been opened in my name. "Is there anything else we should address?" she asked kindly. "Yes," I replied after a moment's thought. "I'd like to remove Thomas as my emergency contact and as the beneficiary on my accounts." It pained me to say those words, but I needed to protect myself completely. Frank had always taught me that love shouldn't cloud judgment when it came to financial matters. "Love with your heart, but protect yourself with your head," he would say. Today, I was finally following that advice. That afternoon, I met with a financial advisor, recommended by Mr. Baldwin, to review my overall financial situation. After 6 months of supporting Thomas Meredith and now her sister, my savings had decreased more than I realized. The advisor helped me create a new budget and investment plan that would ensure my long-term security regardless of what happened with Thomas. My final stop was at a local security company, where I arranged for a locksmith to accompany me back to my house the following day, along with installation of a modern security system with cameras and remote monitoring capabilities. By evening, I felt exhausted, but empowered by the day's accomplishments. Over dinner with Joanne and 2 other longtime friends who had rallied to support me, I shared my plan for reclaiming my home. "I'm bringing in reinforcements tomorrow morning," I explained. "Mr. Baldwin will be there with legal documentation, along with a locksmith security team, and I've requested a police officer to keep things civil." "Do you want us there too?" Joanne asked, squeezing my hand supportively. I considered this for a moment before nodding. "Yes, I think I would. Not to confront Thomas, but just to have friendly faces present, and maybe to help me document everything with photos in case anything goes missing." My friends exchanged determined looks. "We'll be there," they promised in unison. That night, back in my hotel room, I created a detailed inventory of my home's contents, from memory paying special attention to valuable items and sentimental objects that couldn't be replaced. I also gathered every document I could think of that proved my ownership of the house: the deed, insurance policies, tax records, utility bills, in my name. As I finally prepared for sleep, I felt a curious mixture of sorrow and resolution. Tomorrow would forever change my relationship with my son, but it would also restore my dignity and reclaim what was rightfully mine. Whatever happened, I would face it standing tall, secure in the knowledge that I was protecting myself in ways Frank would have wanted. "I wish you were here," I whispered to Frank's memory as I drifted off to sleep. "But I think you'd be proud of me tomorrow." Wednesday morning dawned clear and bright, a perfect Portland autumn day that belied the confrontation ahead. I met Joanne and my other friends for an early breakfast, their unwavering support fortifying me for what was to come. By 8:30, our entire group had assembled in the hotel lobby: Mr. Baldwin in his crisp suit, Officer Peterson, who had been assigned to accompany us, the locksmith and 2 security technicians, and my 3 loyal friends. "Everyone clear on the plan?" Mr. Baldwin asked, his authoritative tone leaving no room for doubt. We all nodded, and with a deep breath, I led our procession of cars back to my home. As we pulled into the driveway, I spotted Thomas's car and Meredith's SUV, confirming they were home. Allison's unfamiliar compact car sat at the curb. The house looked peaceful from outside, blinds still drawn in most windows at this hour. For a moment, looking at the familiar facade with its blue shutters Frank had painted just before he died, I felt a wave of sadness for what had been lost. Not just my sense of security in my home, but the loving relationship I had once shared with my son. Officer Peterson approached the door first, with Mr. Baldwin and me following closely. The rest of our group waited by the vehicles, ready to assist once entry was established. When the officer rang the doorbell, several minutes passed before a disheveled Thomas opened the door, coffee mug in hand. His expression morphed from sleepy confusion to shock as he registered the uniformed officer, then widened further upon seeing me standing with a lawyer. "Mom, what's going on?" he demanded, attempting to block the doorway. "Good morning, Thomas," I replied calmly. "I've come to reclaim my home. These people are here to assist me." "You can't just barge in with police," he protested, looking increasingly alarmed. Mr. Baldwin stepped forward. "Mr. Marshall, I'm Howard Baldwin, your mother's attorney. This is her property as documented by these papers." He held up a folder containing copies of the deed and other proof of ownership. "She has every legal right to enter her own home, and Officer Peterson is here merely to keep the peace." Thomas's gaze darted between us and the group waiting by the cars. "This is ridiculous. We live here now. You can't just throw us out." "Actually, she can," Mr. Baldwin countered evenly. "You have been residing here as guests at Mrs. Marshall's discretion, with no lease or rental agreement. Furthermore, you explicitly told her to leave, effectively abandoning any claim of residency you might have attempted to establish." By now, Meredith had appeared behind Thomas, hastily tying a bathrobe around her waist. "What's happening?" she demanded, her voice rising when she spotted me. "What is she doing here?" Officer Peterson intervened with professional detachment. "Ma'am, sir, I need you both to step aside. Mrs. Marshall has documented ownership of this property and has the right to enter. Let's keep this civil." "This is my home too," Thomas insisted, his face flushing with anger or embarrassment, perhaps both. "I grew up here." "Growing up somewhere doesn't grant ownership, mister," Baldwin explained patiently. "The house is solely in Ruby's name. Now we can discuss this reasonably inside, or we can escalate matters if you continue to refuse entry to the legal owner." The mention of legal escalation seemed to penetrate Thomas's indignation. He stepped back reluctantly, allowing us to enter. The locksmith and security team followed along with my friends, who immediately began photographing the house condition as we had planned. In the living room, we found Meredith's parents having coffee, looking bewildered by the sudden invasion. Allison emerged from the kitchen, her expression shifting from confusion to guilt as she recognized me. What's going on? Meredith's father demanded, standing up as though to take charge of the situation. Mr. Reynolds, I presume. Mr. Baldwin addressed him directly. I'm Howard Baldwin, Mrs. Marshall's attorney. She has come to reclaim her property and is requesting that all of you vacate the premises within 48 hours. This is outrageous, Meredith's mother sputtered. We were invited to stay here. By whom? I asked quietly, finding my voice. Certainly not by me, the owner of this house. The room fell silent as the implications of my statement sank in. Meredith's parents looked to Thomas, who couldn't meet their eyes. Thomas, Mr. Reynolds said slowly, you told us your mother had agreed to let us stay here whenever we visited. You said she was planning to move to a retirement community. He said the same about me. I interjected, my voice steady despite the hurt. But as you can see, that was never my intention. While this conversation unfolded, the locksmith had begun working on the front and back door locks, and the security team was assessing the house for system installation. My friends continued their methodical documentation, photographing rooms, closets, and my belongings. Mom, can we talk about this privately? Thomas asked, desperation creeping into his tone. I believe we should all hear what needs to be said. I replied, seating myself in what had once been Frank's favorite armchair, a symbolic reclaiming of space that hadn't been lost on anyone present. Mr. Baldwin handed me a folder, and with a deep breath, I addressed everyone gathered in my living room. I have here documentation proving my sole ownership of this property. I began, my voice gaining strength with each word. I welcomed my son and his wife into my home temporarily while they dealt with financial difficulties. That arrangement has been violated in numerous ways, culminating 2 days ago when Thomas told me, and I quote, my wife's family will live here now, and suggested I go to hell when I asked where I should go. Meredith's parents turned to Thomas with expressions of shock and disapproval. Furthermore, I continued, I have evidence of unauthorized changes to my home attempts to access my financial accounts and a documented plan to force me into a senior living facility against my wishes so that you could take possession of my house. What evidence? Meredith challenged, though her voice lacked conviction. I overheard your conversation with Thomas in the kitchen on Sunday morning. I revealed, watching her face pale. You were quite specific about your plans for my home and what you intended to do with me. Mr. Baldwin stepped forward again. In light of these circumstances, Mrs. Marshall is being extremely generous. Rather than pursuing legal action for elder abuse, harassment, or attempted financial exploitation, she is simply reclaiming her property and asking you to leave within 48 hours. 48 hours, Thomas protested. We can't find a place that quickly. You've had 6 months to find your own place, I reminded him. Instead, you plotted to take mine. 48 hours is generous given the circumstances. Meredith turned on Thomas, her composed facade cracking. You said this was handled. You said she would never fight back. Now look at this mess. Don't blame him entirely, I interrupted, surprising myself with the steady authority in my voice. This was a joint effort, Meredith. I heard both of you planning to push me out of my own home. Meredith's father stood up, his expression grim. Thomas Meredith, what exactly have you done here? You told us Ruby had agreed to sell you the house. They thought I would surrender without a fight, I explained calmly. They underestimated me because of my age and because I've spent months accommodating their increasingly unreasonable demands. A heavy silence fell over the room, broken only by the locksmith's methodical work and the security technician's quiet consultations in the background. Here are the terms, Mr. Baldwin stated, distributing printed notices to everyone present. You have 48 hours to remove yourselves and your personal belongings from the premises. You may take only what you brought with you, not Mrs. Marshall's furniture, appliances, or household items. We have a detailed inventory and photographic evidence of the house contents. Thomas looked at me, genuine fear finally showing in his eyes. Mom, where are we supposed to go? For a brief moment, my resolve wavered at the sight of my son's distress. Then I remembered his cold dismissal. Go to hell for all I care. and my determination returned. "That's not my concern, Thomas," I replied quietly. "You're adults. Figure it out just as I had to when you kicked me out of my own home." Meredith's parents exchanged glances before her father stood up decisively. "We're leaving today," he announced. "And Meredith, Allison, you're both coming with us until this situation is resolved. I won't be associated with this kind of behavior." "Dad," Meredith protested. "Don't dad me," he cut her off sharply. "Your mother and I raised you better than this. Trying to force an elderly woman out of her own home, I'm ashamed of you both right now." As the full weight of consequences began to settle over the room, I excused myself to inspect the house. Accompanied by Joanne and Officer Peterson, I walked through each room noting changes, damages, and missing items. My bedroom had been completely taken over by Thomas and Meredith, my personal items relegated to boxes in the closet. The guest room where I had been sleeping now contained Allison's belongings spread across every surface. In the basement, I discovered several of my most valuable possessions missing, including Frank's collection of vintage watches and my grandmother's silver service. When I pointed this out to Officer Peterson, he made note of the missing items and advised that we could file a formal theft report if they weren't returned. By early afternoon, the locks had been changed, a new security system was being installed, and Meredith's parents were packing their car, their earlier camaraderie with Thomas and Meredith noticeably absent. Allison worked silently alongside them, avoiding eye contact with me whenever we passed in the hallway. Thomas made one last desperate appeal as I supervised the security installation. "Mom, please," he begged, his voice breaking. "We can work something out. We didn't mean for things to go this far." Looking at my son, this person I had raised and loved unconditionally for 38 years, I felt a complex mixture of heartbreak and resolve. "You meant exactly what you said, Thomas," I replied softly. "You wanted my house and were willing to discard me to get it. Actions have consequences." "What am I supposed to do now?" he asked, sounding suddenly young and lost. "You'll figure it out," I said, "just like I had to when you told me to go to hell." As afternoon stretched into evening, Meredith's family departed, the tension between them palpable even from a distance. Thomas and Meredith remained frantically packing their belongings under the watchful eyes of my friends and the officer. Mr. Baldwin stayed until every legal detail was addressed and the new security system was operational. "Call me immediately if there's any trouble," he advised before leaving. "And remember, you're completely within your rights here, Ruby." By nightfall, I was finally alone in my home again. The new locks securing my doors, cameras monitoring the perimeter. The house felt emptier, but infinitely more peaceful than it had for months. As I settled into my own bedroom for the first time since Meredith's parents' visit in July, I felt both victorious and profoundly sad. I had won back my home, but lost my son in the process. "At least for now," I whispered to myself as I drifted off to sleep in my own bed, hoping that someday healing might be possible, but knowing that I would never again sacrifice my dignity for anyone's approval, even my only child's. The first 2 weeks after reclaiming my home passed in a whirlwind of activity. The day after Thomas and Meredith reluctantly vacated, I began the process of reclaiming and restoring my space. Their hasty departure had left chaos in their wake. Drawers emptied onto floors, furniture askew, and suspicious gaps where my belongings should have been. My friends rallied around me, helping with the physical labor of cleaning and reorganizing while providing the emotional support I desperately needed. Joanne practically moved in for the first week, sleeping in the guest room and keeping me company during those difficult first nights. "Have you heard from Thomas at all?" she asked on the third evening as we sorted through linens that had been stuffed haphazardly into hall closets. "Not directly," I admitted. "He sent 2 text messages, the first demanding we talk about this like adults, and the second saying I've ruined their lives by forcing them out." "The irony of that second message is almost impressive," Joanne remarked dryly. I managed a small smile despite the ache in my heart. "I haven't responded to either. Mr. Baldwin advised keeping all communication through him for now." As we continued restoring order to my home, I discovered several valuable items missing beyond what I'd initially noticed. Frank's entire watch collection had vanished, along with my grandmother's silver, my mother's pearl necklace, and a small Waterford crystal collection I'd inherited from an aunt. Most painful was the disappearance of Frank's wedding ring, which I had kept in my jewelry box since his death. Mr. Baldwin sent a formal demand letter listing each missing item and requesting their immediate return or financial compensation. 3 days later, I woke to find a cardboard box on my front porch, captured by the new security cameras at 3:42 a.m. Inside were most of the missing items, including Frank's wedding ring. The watches and silver remained absent, likely already sold. "Small victories," Mr. Baldwin commented when I called to update him. "If you want to pursue recovery of the remaining items, we certainly can." After reflection, I decided against further legal action for the missing valuables. The emotional cost of prolonged conflict outweighed the financial loss, and I wanted to focus on healing rather than extending the battle. Reclaiming my physical space proved easier than healing the emotional wounds. Each room held memories of both the happy years with Frank and Thomas and the recent months of hurt and betrayal. I found myself alternating between fierce satisfaction in my independence and profound sadness at the fracture in my family. In my craft room, restored from Meredith's office back to my creative space, I discovered my quilt frame had been broken beyond repair. Rather than view this as one more loss, I decided to transform it into something new. I commissioned a local woodworker to create a memory box from the salvageable pieces, a tangible symbol of my journey from brokenness to renewal. By the end of the second week, the house was physically restored, but I still jumped at unexpected noises and checked the security camera app on my phone whenever I heard a car in the driveway. My doctor prescribed mild anti-anxiety medication to help me sleep, and I began attending a support group for people dealing with family estrangement at Joanne's suggestion. The group met weekly at a community center near downtown Portland, a diverse collection of individuals united by the painful experience of family breach. During my first meeting, I sat quietly listening to others share stories that resonated with my own. Parents estranged from children, siblings who hadn't spoken in decades, families fractured by addiction, greed, or simple misunderstanding. When it came my turn to speak, I surprised myself with my candor. "My name is Ruby," I began. "My only son tried to take my home and told me to go to hell when I questioned him." The words hung in the air, stark and painful, but also freeing in their honesty. No minimizing, no making excuses, just the unvarnished truth of what had happened. The group's facilitator, a compassionate woman named Diana, who had been estranged from her own daughter for 12 years before reconciling, nodded encouragingly. "And how are you handling that betrayal, Ruby?" "One day at a time," I replied. "Some moments I feel strong and justified. Others I question everything I did as a mother to end up here." "That self-questioning is normal," Diana assured me. "But remember, adult children make their own choices. You aren't responsible for Thomas's actions, only your response to them." Those words became a lifeline in the weeks that followed. I repeated them to myself during sleepless nights, when doubt crept in, questioning whether I had been too harsh or acted too quickly. But each morning, waking in my own home with my dignity intact, I knew I had done what was necessary. A month after the confrontation, I received an unexpected letter in the mail. Not from Thomas, but from Meredith's father. The envelope contained a check covering the approximate value of the missing watches and silver, along with a handwritten note. "Mrs. Marshall, please accept this as compensation for the items that disappeared from your home during my daughter and son-in-law's stay. I was unaware of how they had been treating you, and I want you to know that my wife and I do not condone their behavior. We raised our daughters to respect others, especially their elders, and we are deeply disappointed in Meredith's actions. I also want to apologize for my own role in making you uncomfortable in your home during our visits. I was operating under false assumptions provided by Thomas and Meredith, but that's no excuse for my disrespect. Sincerely, Harold Reynolds." The note brought unexpected tears to my eyes, not for the money, which was generous, but unnecessary, but for the acknowledgement. Someone in their family recognized the wrong that had been done to me, and that validation helped heal a small portion of the hurt. I sent a brief thank you note to Mr. Reynolds, accepting his apology and expressing hope that his relationship with Meredith would heal in time. I understood better than most how painful family rifts could be, regardless of who was at fault. As autumn deepened toward winter, I established new routines in my reclaimed space. I joined a senior center gardening club, volunteered at my old elementary school, reading to children twice weekly, and hosted regular dinner gatherings with my supportive friends. The house that had felt like a battlefield gradually transformed back into a sanctuary. 3 months after the confrontation, a letter arrived from Thomas. Unlike his initial text messages, this one showed signs of genuine reflection. Dear Mom, I've started this letter a dozen times, struggling to find the right words. I'm sorry, seems woefully inadequate for what happened, but it's where I need to start. I am truly deeply sorry for how I treated you in your own home. Meredith left me last month. After we lost your house, we moved in with her parents, but things quickly deteriorated. The stress revealed cracks in our relationship that had been there all along. I see now how I allowed her to influence me against you, though that's not an excuse. I was a grown man making my own choices, and I chose terribly. I don't expect forgiveness, and I'm not asking to move back in or for money. I just wanted you to know that I recognize how badly I hurt you, and I live with that shame every day. The house was always yours, built with your and Dad's hard work. I had no right to try to take it from you. If you ever feel ready to talk, even just for closure, I would be grateful for the chance. If not, I understand. Your son, Thomas. I read the letter multiple times, my emotions swinging between cautious hope and protective skepticism. Was this genuine remorse or another manipulation? The mention of Meredith leaving suggested his circumstances had changed dramatically, which might explain the timing of his apology. I brought the letter to my next support group meeting, seeking perspective from people who understood the complexities of family estrangement. What does your gut tell you? Diana asked after I'd shared the contents. That he's hurting, and probably sincere, I admitted. But also that one letter doesn't erase months of calculated mistreatment. An older gentleman named Walter, estranged from his son for similar reasons involving property, offered his perspective. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or allowing someone to hurt you again. It means freeing yourself from the burden of resentment while maintaining healthy boundaries. His words resonated deeply. I didn't need to choose between complete reconciliation and permanent estrangement. There could be a middle path, cautious communication with clear boundaries. After a week of reflection, I sent Thomas a brief response. Thomas, thank you for your letter and apology. The past months have been painful for all of us. I'm sorry to hear about you and Meredith, though I understand how stress can reveal fundamental issues in a relationship. I would be willing to meet for coffee at Riverside Cafe next Saturday at 10 a.m. if that works for you. Just to talk. Mom. The neutral location was intentional. A public space where neither of us would have home court advantage, and where the conversation could remain civil. When Saturday arrived, I dressed carefully, wanting to project strength and composure rather than the vulnerability I still felt. Joanne offered to sit at a nearby table as moral support, but I declined. This was a conversation I needed to have independently. I arrived 15 minutes early, selecting a table with a view of the entrance. When Thomas walked in exactly at 10, I was struck by how much he had aged in 3 months. His face looked thinner with new lines around his eyes and mouth. He scanned the cafe anxiously until our eyes met, and I raised my hand in a small wave. Mom, he said as he approached, hesitating awkwardly beside the table. Thank you for coming. Sit down, Thomas, I replied, neither warmly nor coldly. Would you like coffee? The initial conversation was stilted, focusing on neutral topics. The unseasonably cold weather changes to the neighborhood, a new bakery that had opened nearby. Gradually, as our coffee cups emptied and were refilled, we edged toward the real issues. I lost everything, Thomas finally said. My marriage, my job prospects here in Portland, my relationship with you. It's been educational. He attempted a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Dad always said the most expensive education is learning from your mistakes. Your father was a wise man. I agreed. He would have been deeply disappointed by what happened, but he would have wanted a path forward. Thomas nodded, looking down at his hands. I don't have any excuses, Mom. I got greedy and entitled. The more you gave, the more I expected, until I convinced myself I deserved your house more than you did. The raw honesty of his statement caught me off guard. I had expected partial admissions or subtle blame shifting, not this direct acknowledgement. What happens now? I asked. What are your plans? I've accepted a job in Seattle starting next month, he replied. Less money than I was making before, but a fresh start. I've been staying with a college friend meanwhile. We talked for nearly 2 hours, gradually moving from the painful past toward a tentative future. I maintained clear boundaries, making it explicitly clear that he would not be moving back into my home under any circumstances, nor would I be providing financial support. Thomas accepted these terms without argument, seeming to understand that trust once broken so severely could only be rebuilt slowly, if at all. As we prepared to leave, Thomas asked the question I sensed had been weighing on him. Can we ever get back to where we were, Mom? Before all this? I considered my answer carefully. No, I said finally. We can never go back to that exact relationship. Too much has happened. But perhaps we can build something new over time, something based on mutual respect, rather than expectation. He nodded, accepting this limited hope. I'd like that opportunity. It will take time, I cautioned, and consistent effort. Words are easy, Thomas. Actions reveal truth. Our goodbye was awkward. Neither a hug nor a handshake seemed appropriate, so we settled for a brief nod of acknowledgement. As I watched him walk away, I felt neither the crushing grief of complete loss nor the relief of perfect resolution. Instead, I experienced something more nuanced, the bittersweet recognition that relationships, like people, can be simultaneously broken and healing. In the months that followed, Thomas and I established a careful new pattern of communication. Brief phone calls every 2 weeks, occasional emails sharing news. When he moved to Seattle, he sent his new address and contact information. I mailed a simple housewarming gift, a coffee maker practical rather than sentimental. His thank you note arrived promptly. These small exchanges represented baby steps toward rebuilding trust. I remained vigilant against manipulation or entitlement, but also open to genuine change. The support group continued to provide perspective and validation, helping me navigate this complex terrain between estrangement and reconciliation. 1 year after the confrontation, I invited Thomas to visit for a day, not to stay overnight, but for lunch and an afternoon together. He accepted gratefully, arriving with a potted plant rather than cut flowers, a small symbol of something meant to last. As we sat in the garden that Frank had planted decades ago, surrounded by perennials that returned year after year despite winter's hardships, Thomas asked about the lessons I had learned from our painful ordeal. I learned that love without boundaries isn't really love at all, I told him. It's enablement. True love requires respect, and sometimes it requires standing up for yourself even against those you care about most. And I learned that entitlement destroys gratitude, he replied thoughtfully. When I started believing I deserved everything you gave me, I stopped appreciating any of it. The conversation wasn't a magical healing of all wounds, but it represented progress. 2 adults acknowledging hard truths and tentatively building a new relationship on more solid foundations. That evening after Thomas left, I sat in Frank's old armchair, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. We raised an imperfect son, I whispered to Frank's memory, but perhaps not a lost one. The journey from betrayal to healing hadn't followed a straight path. There had been setbacks amid the progress days when old hurts surfaced and trust wavered. But standing firm in my self-respect had opened the possibility for authentic reconciliation rather than a return to destructive patterns. My home remained mine alone, a sanctuary I had fought to reclaim and would never again surrender. Within these walls, I had found not just security, but a profound lesson about self-worth that transcended property rights. By refusing to be discarded, I had discovered strength I never knew I possessed. Most importantly, I learned that happy endings rarely look like fairy tales. They come instead as quiet moments of peace, as boundaries respected, as painful growth that eventually bears fruit. Sometimes they arrive as a phone call from a son who is slowly, imperfectly learning to be a better person. And sometimes they manifest simply as the quiet satisfaction of sleeping soundly in your own bed in your own home, secure in the knowledge that you are enough, worthy of respect, deserving of dignity, and capable of standing up for yourself when it matters most. Have you ever had to stand your ground against family members who took advantage of your generosity? What would you have done in my situation with Thomas? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share to help others who might be facing similar situations. Remember that setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's essential for healthy relationships. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the strength to protect your dignity whenever it's challenged.